Hi everyone. So the new Guard Codex is available next Friday the 25th of November, but plenty of YouTubers are already providing info and have copies of the Codex. I actually emailed GW a little while ago asking for a copy myself early, but given I've only got a modest 3,500 subscribers, I'm clearly microscopic in the world of YouTube. But from all the other YouTubers, we have enough info to start to form an opinion. However, given I don't have a copy of the Codex, I may make some mistakes here and there, so please forgive me. Right, so let's discuss the new rebranded Hammer of the Emperor, now called Born Soldiers, versus the 14 odd custom doctrines to which we can choose 2. So overall, all Guard units have clearly been enhanced into 9th edition, with perhaps only the infantry squad looking to have been untouched, but becoming more expensive at 65 points, and the Sergeant's Power Sword and Plasma Pistol costing you 5 points each, so call it 75 points in total. We do of course have Cadian, Catagen and Deathcore Creek dedicated infantry data sheets. Let's zero in on the Cadian sheet for now. The Cadians now have a unique rule being called Shock Troops, generating an additional hit on 6s for las guns and las pistols. Now Born Soldiers, as you know, auto wins on 6s, which as we know is very powerful for low strength, high volume weaponry, with the las gun being the primary example. So examining just these two in detail, let's use some math hammer to work out which in isolation is better. So let's go with 7 las guns firing 14 times into a toughness 6 target, so wounding on 6s. If you rely just upon shock troops, if shooting ballistic skill of 4+, you'd get 9 hits, including 2 exploding 6s to hit. This would then go on to 2 wounds for your opponent to save with their saving throw. Now 14 las guns fire with just Born Soldiers, aka Hammer of the Emperor. 7 would hit, of which 2 would be auto wound, and the remaining 5 would generate 1 more saving throw for your opponent. So that's 3 times, or in other words, an increase of 50%. We know in isolation that Hammer of the Emperor is very powerful, given that it cuts straight through anything like transhuman physiology, which is becoming increasingly common via stratagems, warlord traits, or baked into data sheets. Now Cadian shock troops are clearly only one data sheet that will appear in your army lists, but I'd say they're going to be relatively common in army lists, given their shock troop rule and some superior stratagem support. Out of interest for reference, the same scenario with both Born Soldiers and shock troops would equate to 4 saving throws for your opponent on account for 2 auto wounds, but also an additional 2 hits of 6s going into the wound roll. So can any other of the regimental doctrines beat Born Soldiers? Let's check it out. So as I said earlier, all units have been modernized with things like flat 3 damage battle cannons, flat 2 damage manticores, and the order take aim giving out AP-1 on shooting, but also comically its brother melee order fixed bayonet turns bayonet thrust into AP-1, which represents the troops extra sharpening their bayonets in the morning. So if everything is now more killy, do we still need auto wounding 6s? I'd say potentially not. I've been playing a lot of tournaments over the last few months, as you know, and firstly it really sucked playing an 8th edition book into any of the newer 9th edition codexes. But as I reflect on what lost me most of the games, as it wasn't my destructive ability, but more the inability for me to hold primary objectives. As you know, holding primaries is best achieved by OBSEC units which are relatively durable, which Guard infantry squads of course are not. Now I'm going to put down my first firm opinion in that the new doctrine Armoured Superiority, combined with the tank order Shock and Awe, are going to be transformational for our gameplay. 5 model count OBSEC Leman Russes, Crimeas, Tauroxes and even Hellhounds is going to be really effective. Tank orders have been boosted to have a range finally of 12 inches, and like the old infantry orders can splash across to other vehicles with a squadron keyword within 6 inches. I'm pretty convinced by this that given games aren't always won by the destruction of your opponent, but by your ability to obviously hold the primary. I look forward to pushing forward Leman Russes that are OBSEC onto an objective, firing away at enemy units, being potentially tagged in combat, but still causing carnage thanks to the turret weapon rule. I feel that Leman Russes have really benefited in this new codex, with an extra wound, the turret weapon rule, and finally counting as more than 1 model for primary holding. Right, let's now check out some of the other doctrines and how they compare to born soldiers and my favourite, armoured superiority. So firstly, I've grouped them into those that affect movement, those that affect damage output, and those that affect our survivability. Now it should be said that 6 of these affect all regiment units, in the sense they benefit all infantry squads, Leman Russes, Basilisks, Sentinels, Crimeas, command squads, etc, etc. The rest impact specific unit types and require lists to be built a certain way. Now this is no different to what we had in 8th edition, but overall obviously they're way more powerful. So an early favourite was always going to be mechanised infantry. Being able to move a transport first and then debus the infantry means essentially we've got a 15-inch move on infantry squads from a Crimea or 17-inch move from a Taurox. This is crazy good, setting out for some lethal stratagem combos that will be explored in later videos. Getting raised banners off early will no longer be an issue in turn 1 on any objectives further out of your deployment zone, and it will allow early OPSEC unit delivery onto an objective, or likewise late gameplay denying your opponent's primary. I then feel that recon operators and blitz division could be situationally brilliant, locking in early board control or simply reducing your deployment phase time by putting a ton of units into a reserve. You also gain an element of flexibility in being able to respond to your opponent's turn 1 movements. As reference, a Leman Russ and 3 infantry squads is a 19 power level using 8th edition power levels and costing you 2 command points to put in reinforcements. So just 1 command point if you're using blitz division. Swift of the Wing would probably respond very well to cavalry and Leman Russ Rogue of Dawn heavy lists. But I do feel that 7-inch move infantry squads isn't that super duper, given they are still toughness 3, 5+ save, which was the right thing to do. Now Bombardiers of course relies upon you taking a lot of artillery, and how good it's going to be depends on if the next balanced data slate includes guard in the indirect fire nerf. If it doesn't, this will be absolutely wild. Take a ton of Sentinels combined with a Doctrine Swift of the Wind, and turn 1 you could see you delivering Blizzard Skill 3+ Manticores, Basilisks, Mortars and Ordnance Batteries, which could make for some very potential early game tabling of your opponents. I personally hope guard is actually captured in this nerf, as to not do so will probably make us way too good with the consequential flood of meta chasers and the subsequent nerfing of our long-awaited codex. As to the other 6 shooting doctrines, I won't look at them in too much detail because there are a lot. I'd say overall though that Trophy Hunters are probably too limited in its application and cost you 2 doctrines. Hurloin weapons is good, but unlike in 8th edition where Demolisher siege cannons were the only way to go, there are now so many other viable turret weapons that a 24-inch range is less of a concern. Parade Drill is frankly crap, whilst elite shock troopers could always be helpful. Jumping ahead to a combo is the use of the tank ace called Veteran Commander, allowing you to take an additional regimental doctrine to equip one with the now ridiculous Vanquisher battle cannon and lock in that single glorious AP-5 ignore invul saves shot. Brutal strength is pretty meh, and I feel that catechins have been somewhat nerfed in this new book. Veteran Guerrillas, however, could actually be quite useful in 9th edition, given the prevalence of terrain, and if Armour of Contempt sticks around, the AP-1 infantry order, take aim, will be muted, but at least partially offset when a single Rubik Marine in a 1000 Sun squad is towing a piece of cover. Now industrial efficiency clearly illustrates that we're going to lose Armour of Contempt. Otherwise to not do so would be pointless, surely right? But ignoring AP-1 attacks is nothing to scoff at, given any light infantry weapons targeting our infantry will see us saving always on a 5+, which can be increased by the new infantry order take cover, giving us a 4+ save, which given orders can be splashed, could be very, very helpful. Lastly, Grim Demeanor in isolation is pretty limited, but I think its access to the stratagem acceptable losses would remove any concerns of vehicles being tagged in melee. Yes, turret weapons is clearly great, but if you really want to get Leman Russ moving again, help it out and use your stratagem, and then pile a heap of mortar or lasgun shots onto those pesky Harlequin troops or Dark Elder ninjas. Yes, hits of 1 would hit your tank, but clearly choose weapon types which are a threat to the unit that has tagged you, but not your toughness 8 chassis. So a combo I will be trying out early is Armoured Superiority for 5 model count vehicles, partnered with Grim Demeanor, as I just said. My list would be a platoon of 4 Lehman Russes with Tank Commander, 2 Crimeas, tons of infantry, mortars and other trimmings like Rough Riders and maybe even some Bulgrams. I usually push forward my Lehman Russes quite aggressively, so being able to clear off any pesky melee units will be helpful. What do you think? So from all of that, where does that put my original question of born soldiers with auto-wounding 6s versus taking 2 regimental doctrines? I say the answer lies simply in whether you want to annihilate your opponent or win on points at scoring the primary or whatever our secondary objectives will be come Chapter Approved 2023. As said at the top of the video, just destroying your opponent isn't a guarantee for victory. Harlequins, for example, are in my opinion some of the toughest opponents to deal with. Being very slippery and if played properly, are constantly hidden in terrain pieces where auto-wounding 6s do nothing for you. Yes, Harlequins are just one faction played out there, but principally, a cunning opponent, no matter their army, will utilise similar principles. Obviously, I haven't played yet with a new codex, but I feel to use only born soldiers will cut a lot of tactical opportunity available to those custom doctrines. As we'll explore in later videos, there are now some amazing tools in the codex, giving us fantastic flexibility, being able to respond effectively to a lot of scenarios where before we simply had no answer. So what do you think of all this? Is taking born soldiers superior to 2 custom doctrines? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to support me, you can do so by buying some channel merchandise, leaving a comment, like or share, or joining my Patreon platoon. So keep your bayonet sharp, las gun oil, favouring the Emperor strong. Patreon platoon, sound off. Tank Commander Glenn, Tank Commander Mitchell, Tank Commander Watchdog Van Etten, Colour Sergeant DuPont, Sergeant Bruxius, Adal, the Colonel Merrill, Veterans Gibson, Hall, Lundeen, Guardsman Beard, Coquelin, Flint, Hills, Malik, Nitton, Nguyen, Smith, Tom, Tompkin, Conscript Bosun, England, Gilliam, Goodwin.